Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jesse Randall. I'm the founder and CEO of Sweater. And, it's like we said before, Sweater's entire objective is to create a venture fund that anyone can put money into. We're well on our way to getting that into market and excited to get it in your hands. But in the meantime, because that's kind of a long path, we are excited to always be able to bring fantastic founders to the table who have been through the trenches and have real raw stories and experience to share with us, the rest of us who may still be stuck there, knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel and the ability to build something great. And today I am super excited to be able to have Nick here with us. And, I'm so excited for you to be here. So,
Jesse, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And it's awesome what you're doing for the entrepreneurial community.
yeah, no, great to have you here. So, just in case, those that are listening aren't super familiar with Gainsight, Gainsight has a heck of a story. And I mean, you've got a lot of very recent activity that are big milestones. So why don't I give it to you for just a second, kind of give everyone the high level pitch. If you were, talking to an investor for the first time, what do you tell them about Gainsight?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a number you've heard of Gainsight. If you haven't, at the end of the day, we're known as the company behind kind of this customer success movement. And customer success really, as you might know it in a couple of different contexts. In a tactical way, as an early stage entrepreneur, customer success is about making sure the product that you're building is the one the market wants and that people are using it well. And ideally they stay with you and they grow and they become an advocate. From an investor perspective, what's happening is customer success is tied to one of the most important metrics for a SaaS business, which is net retention. For every dollar that I start the year with from an existing customer, is that dollar turning into 90 cents because people are leaving, or is it turning into $1.50? That's the most important metric in valuing SaaS companies. And Gainsight basically builds software and has a lot of expertise on optimizing customer success and maximizing net retention.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh man, this kind of stuff. I know I'm totally a geek, but I love it. So like
Great.
I specialize in financial modeling, and
Cool.
one of my favorite things to screw around with is churn.
Mhm.
And understanding how that can affect your lifetime value and all
Yeah,
that kind of
everything.
stuff.
Everything.
Yeah, but I mean, like I really like the point that you make as well about kind of the land and expand strategy and turning $1 into $1.50. That's really interesting. So how does like tell us more about the software component of Gainsight and like how you're actually tracking those metrics and integrating that into companies?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, typically companies, when faced with this challenge of, okay, gosh, we got to make sure our customers are onboarding well, make sure they're using the product, make sure they're sticky, make sure they're staying with us and then growing and becoming an advocate, right? It's a lot of stuff. And what we find companies do is initially they throw people at the problem. So they hire some CSMs, right? And that's great. And we're a huge fan of CSMs and really invest in that community. But then those CSMs, the challenges we see companies deal with a lot are, number one, no matter how many CSMs you have, a lot of companies end up being surprised by customers that were unhappy, maybe some that left you that you just didn't even know about, right? So that surprise, how do we make sure that we're always ahead of the curve by looking at data and early indicators and then basically recommending to CSMs customers they should be reaching out to that maybe they didn't even think about or maybe they were going to talk to later. So that's the first thing we really hear about. Second thing is, how do I make sure that I can scale? Because I can have CSMs reaching out to maybe 10 accounts a quarter, 15, 20. What if I have like 10,000 accounts? And how do I actually do some of this through automation, what people call tech touch, like high touch with technology, right? So second challenge people deal with is scale. How do I scale? Third challenge a lot of people are dealing with these days, especially, is how do I actually make this not just about defense, but how do I make it about offense? How do I actually drive this customer to become a better expansion opportunity, to go back to sales, right? And then tying into the product, how do I use the data coming out of the product about how people are using the product, what features they're using, are they sticky, to not only get the customer to renew with me, but actually use the product better. And so we built a suite of products. We have 4 products today. We call the whole thing Customer Cloud. And it does all the stuff I've talked about and more. It helps you identify which customers are kind of early warnings for risk, helps you mobilize the right next best action for your CSM team to focus, helps you automate so they can scale to more accounts, helps everyone have a common view of the customer. And actually some of our technology sits inside your product. So it'll actually track how people are using your product through some lightweight JavaScript, give you deep analytics about usage, but also guide the user to the next best action in the product. So maybe it's a new user that's never tried out an advanced feature. Maybe it's a first-time user going through onboarding. So it's a number of different technologies, but all around kind of guiding the customer through this journey and maximizing the chance that they stay with you, spend more money, and become an advocate.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love it. So why don't you give us an idea of kind of your reach in the world? I mean, you obviously had a very big milestone a couple of months
Yeah.
ago, which is one way to say it, but also like, how many customers or like whatever you might be
Yeah.
comfortable sharing.
We're a pretty transparent company. So we just announced we crossed 100 million of ARR, about 700 employees, global, all around the world. And we are a high touch business. So our number of customer counts about 700, something like that. So where our customers tend to be, we have a kind of startup type offering that's more in the 30, 40, 50K range, but we have a lot of customers in the hundreds of thousands or in a number in the millions as well. And then we just did a big investment round with Vista Equity Partners. And we were proud to be one of the now 1,000 companies that are unicorns. Definitely not a unique thing anymore, but it was cool still.
Whatever, it's still an awesome milestone.
So cool.
Yeah, well, and that you're able to bring some money back into the company and
Yeah.
take some chips off the table and everything. I mean, that's fantastic.
Totally.
Yeah. And I've heard that Vista is just a great partner to have anyways. I think I read your piece on that a few weeks ago. You were talking about how you benefited from them.
Incredible. They're an incredible partner. Vista. So one of the kind of serendipities was a lot of investors have figured out that customer success is an awesome way to drive more shareholder value. And so Vista themselves, saw over and over again as they were buying software companies, they'd see, especially as these companies were moving to the cloud, that they couldn't just have that old model of like selling a customer and moving on to the next customer, sell the customer and move on to the next customer. Some people call that like drive-by selling, right? They couldn't have that model. And so Vista basically started recommending customer success as a concept, and actually just sort of organically Gainsight showed up in their portfolio and became part of the recommended stack. And so about half of Vista companies use Gainsight. And then I think because of that, we got on their radar. And so then they started talking to us and sending us lots of nice love notes about how they want to, partner with Gainsight, right? I'm sure many of you entrepreneurs get lots of notes from investors, right? Which is great. And so eventually they, made us a nice offer towards the end of last year. And they've been great because, some of these later stage growth kind of PE type investors, one of the things that's cool is they have some operational capability internally. So, we want to do stuff like we want to be a scalable company that hopefully could go public someday, right? So we want to be really operationally disciplined, and we want to be great at sort of scale and hiring and all those kinds of things. And they just have a lot of resources that you can leverage. You don't have to leverage, but you can leverage to help make you greater. In addition, I think they're passionate about the same things we are. We're very passionate about our values and culture. We talk about our idea that our purpose of our company isn't customer success software. It's sort of this larger thing of we want to be living proof you can win in business while being human first. This idea that really a lot of companies lost sight of the idea that companies exist for human beings. And that human first concept, Vista is very excited about too. And in fact, one of the things I was very excited about this morning, I was on a panel of Vista CEOs. They do kind of a monthly CEO roundtable. And we were just talking about DEI and all the investments Vista companies are putting into DEI. Obviously, that's not a new thing, and most companies hopefully are doing it. But it's really cool to see that they're passionate, not just about the money, but also kind of trying to do right by our stakeholders as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what a great community to be a part of. Congratulations on all those milestones you've been hitting. It's just incredible. So let's jump into some of the stories, see if we can document kind of how you got to this point in time. So I call it the back of the napkin moment, go back in time.
Yeah.
Like where were you and how did you come up with this concept for Gainsight?
Yeah. So first off, it's kind of an interesting kind of convergence. So I joined the company. I'm not the official founder. I joined extremely early as we were just getting started. And it was this weird serendipity where myself, actually our main investor, and the two founders all kind of had a similar idea in similar times. So my story is I was running another company before Gainsight called Live Office. And I basically ran, that was a SaaS business, my first SaaS company. And, you do something at a SaaS business and you learn all this stuff on the job about, billing customers and churn and all that stuff. I knew none of that before my last company. But one of the things I learned was, gosh, as a CEO, you spend so much time in a SaaS business on your existing customers, on retaining them, on churn, on upsell, et cetera. And so I sold my last business in end of 2011. I was an entrepreneur in residence at Excel Venture Partners, so a venture firm, and great firm. And I was sort of thinking about what I want to do, and actually wrote up this long email about how, I think in the future, more businesses will have to focus more on their customers and, probably need software for that. So anyways, that was sort of, back of my mind. It wasn't something I launched, right? But just at the same time, a friend of mine was at Battery Ventures, and a guy named Roger Lee, and he was basically seeing in his portfolio companies over and over again, this increasing focus on retention and renewals. Like they were an investor in Marketo, which is an early SaaS company. And they just saw it more and more. And so they started looking for like, is there a company solving this problem? And they found a couple little startups here and there, right? And so they found this company. Actually, our company was founded in St. Louis, Missouri, which is also still a big part of our company, but
Oh,
obviously
nice. Cool.
not sort of central casting in 2013 for a tech company. Nowadays, much more so, right? But Battery found this company. Originally, we were called J Barra Software, so we had a different name. And Battery found this company that was very, very small, just like a beta product and sort of an idea, but two awesome founders and great early team. And they basically kind of made this triangle connection. They're like, hey, they hadn't funded the company, but they're like, Nick, meet Jim and Sridhar, our two founders. And I came in and I just fell in love with the idea, and I fell in love with the team. And just it was like a problem that I had faced before, and problem honestly I thought about solving too. And so rather than doing something of my own or whatever, I decided to join forces with them. And this is sort of like pre-real revenue or anything else. So it's sort of a great time to jump in because it felt like we could all make it our own, but we were really aligned around values. So I joined the company in like February 2013. February 4th, 2013. Still remember that. And then we launched the business in April of 2013. And so it's kind of Battery, Nick, and Jim and Sridhar together, and it's been amazing ever since. And challenging and awesome. Amazing and challenging and hard. And by the way, it's not all smooth sailing. So we'll talk all about that. Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so these guys, sorry, I'm trying to take some notes. I'm going to forget names. So the original founders then, how long had they been working on it before they were introduced to you?
I think they had actually a different idea, classic, founder story where there was like a totally different idea that was there like a year before. But I think this idea probably 6 months. Something in that range.
Okay. So it's still like really on the edge. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so did you end up staying in California and they stayed in St. Louis?
Yeah. So we with this whole like Zoom thing, we've been doing it for a long time. So I guess like I don't know. I worked before my last company. I worked in a big company at Symantec, and when you were in a big company, like no matter what you do, your team's not all in one place. Like that just never happens because they do M&A. And so I was sort of used to like, okay, either you travel or you do video conferencing or whatever. And so it wasn't daunting at all. And sorry for my dog in the back there. We all have stuff at home. So I basically was like, look, this is kind of great in a way because I can't say I was some sage, but I knew it was hard and getting harder to hire people in the Bay Area. So we started out actually with the unique combination of our first 3 offices were Mountain View, California, St. Louis, Missouri, and then the other founder was in Hyderabad, India, Sridhar. So we had this interesting triumvirate, right? Whereas like there's no time zone overlap, there's no direct flight, all that kind of stuff. But it was awesome. And it's a huge strength today. And our biggest offices today are Hyderabad, India, and St. Louis, Missouri. So it's really been awesome being in those communities. So that's kind of how we got started, and just sort of we decided like we're going to be a distributed company. So today, if you look at our business, about 700 people in the company, maybe 720, 730, something like that, and about 350 in Hyderabad, 50, 60 in Bangalore, 75, 80 in St. Louis, maybe 50 in the Bay Area, and then tons of people work from home. Lots, and we have a small London office, small Tel Aviv office, and small Phoenix office.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I think the first time I ran into you was in the Phoenix office, actually. I lived in Phoenix at the time. I remember going to the office itself, and there was some entrepreneur event that night. And that was my first exposure to Gainsight.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. Okay. So if we go back then, right? So you got your start with this group. Right. How long until you raised money from that point? If you don't mind, because I kind of use those as bumpers. They don't have bumpers.
What happened was we had this weird kind of like, it was like a convergence, basically Battery, Nick, Jim and Sridhar. So we raised money right then. Like
okay. Yeah. Well, that's nice.
We were really fortunate that like we basically got a Series A. It was actually like 6 million headline number, but actually it was sort of 2 tranches. So like the first tranche was like $3 million, which by the way, these numbers sound very small in 2021, right? This is certainly like the age of our company, right? That this is like a pre-seed round now. But back then that was, I guess a decent Series A. So that was a Series A of the company.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. Okay. So then let's put a different bumper on there, right?
Yep.
So why don't we like just talk about like the first 24 months of the company and kind of have that be some of the conversation. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was the first product. Actually, no, let's go back. We have 2 of them. So we're going to talk about the first product and why they told you this wouldn't work. Basically, is kind of the short term for that. So let's start on that, right? So obviously you had some believers, right, with Battery and this other group, right out of the gates. But when you actually went to go implement this, what was the pushback? Did people say that this wasn't a thing or like?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And by the way, like not not like in a negative way, like don't like you, but like, oh yeah, I don't think this is a category. Here, let me give you all the stuff.
Yeah,
Which, by the way,
you created the category, right?
yeah, it's just for tech companies. Salesforce can do this. SaaS is too small of a category. I don't know if customer success as a thing, department independent of technology is a thing. It's really about data and analytics. So it's not really about the software. It's just about your data. I mean, yeah, I can find like 100 more, but yeah, there's one of the ones that came out was like, customer success back in 2013. It's hard to recognize now, but it's like, wasn't a term that people were using then. So a lot of friends of mine were like, why don't you call it something more mainstream, like customer intelligence or customer, machine learning or customer AI or customer something that was like more general versus customer success. Like, what is that? Nobody knows what that is. So that's probably one of the biggest kind of rejections is what is customer success. Another one, Jesse, was the like question of, do you want to tie yourself to this like new job that at the time was pretty junior, So like customer success now is very important. A lot of companies have senior executives. Back then it wasn't, if you had them, they weren't that senior. And so I think some people are like, why are you hitching your wagon to that? Right. And that it created some challenges early on, which we can talk about in terms of like our buyers weren't always the most empowered people in the company. And to this day, sometimes that's a challenge, but the long-term view has been great because that career has really ascended over the last 8 years.
Yeah. That's great. So for all the founders out there that are, trying to create new categories or having pushback against their concept, what would you suggest for them to be able to mitigate? Because like I felt this a lot myself. There's a lot of projecting onto you, especially from very smart people, right? Very like lots of opinions getting pushed into your world. So how do you counter that without being rude and while trying to also be persuasive? Or do you just, if there's pushback, do you just cut them out and just look for people that fit? What's the strategy?
It's an awesome question. I think you deal with it a lot also with investors, right? Because they're involved, And so I think our investors luckily were super supportive. So they were kind of more deferential to what we wanted to do. I think the people that didn't love the idea, I think it wasn't, you don't push them out because honestly you want the feedback, but you probably wait to come back to them till you have a little more traction, right? So you don't come back to them like the next week and be like, yeah, I'm still doing that idea. Kind of didn't listen to you, but a year later, yeah, we did, like for example, with our situation, yeah, I know you didn't like the customer success concept, but we actually threw an event for customer success and like 300 people showed up. So, that's like, so you have a data point, right? And then that helps, so I think some of the people that like were not believers weren't doing it out of like some malice. They just didn't think it was going to work. And I think when I came back with data, then they saw, okay, maybe it will work a little bit at least. So yeah. And by the way, there's truth on all sides. You never know what would happen in the other branch of, the alternate timeline, the alternate, right?
That's true.
So who knows, but I think that what I did feel like is we found a coherent strategy that like at least all fit together, in our case, tying to the customer success movement.
Yeah. So to what extent do you believe that as founders, you can kind of create your own reality?
Oh my gosh. I think you have nothing else. So you have to. I wrote a blog post I'm a super nerdy science person. And I wrote this like super nerdy blog post about how, the software markets are more like quantum physics and less like classical physics. So classical physics, like classical physics is like everything like Newton, Einstein, et cetera. And the basic concept in classical physics is the world exists and it is a reality independent of us. And in quantum mechanics, it's just not clear what the reality is independent of us as the observer. You might have heard weird experiments about how if we see things or not, different things happen, right? And so I believe that software markets are more like quantum mechanics, where essentially like the reason things exist is not because they just were written into stone. It's because people make them happen. So the best example in the world is what was the TAM, the total addressable market of Salesforce.com when they launched, right? It was probably SMB companies that wanted Salesforce automation software, right? Okay, a few years later, what was the TAM of Salesforce? It was probably all companies that wanted Salesforce automation software. Then a few years after that, well, it was all companies that wanted Salesforce automation or customer support software. Then it was all companies that wanted Salesforce automation support or marketing. Today, it's business intelligence and data warehouse, data integration and e-commerce software and slot and messaging, right? And so those markets don't naturally fit together. That was Mark Benioff making them fit together. He was the observer, like changing the universe, changing the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really believe that as an entrepreneur, you are observing the reality, but you're also changing it. Now, you can't do it all overnight. You got to start small, right? And find something and, make that really successful. But don't kid yourself that like the best companies, everything just sort of like fell into place. I think the entrepreneurs made it happen. And I think in particular, the difference between the really successful company and the next one is usually an entrepreneur sort of saying like, I have a bigger vision, right? Like that's, you can look at an Uber versus a Zimride, right? Like, so not Zimride was left. There's another company that was the first one that created the ride sharing. I'm blanking the name of it, but yeah, but even Uber versus Lyft, obviously there's a gap there. And then, gaps beyond that, Airbnb versus whoever the second company is in that space. There's some level of they kind of force and will their way into a bigger market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that perspective. That's fantastic. So in dealing with,
you can see I have an Albert Einstein poster right behind me, so that's it's the story.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the best persuasion is probably traction, right? Evidence of what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's sort of traction by what metric makes sense. So in Gainsight, we had some traction ARR wise, annual recurring revenue, but actually like the biggest traction was like the number of people coming to our event and like the number of people in CSM, because early on you may not have the end result showing up in your business in terms of revenue or whatever, but what's your evidence that something's working?
Yeah. Like 300 people showing up at an event.
That's exactly right. At least for us, that was like, well, that's cool.
Yeah. I love it. That's awesome. So there's a whole, other side of having people tell you that your baby's ugly, which is very emotional.
Yeah.
Right? So what's your tip for dealing with the emotion of having people not catch your vision?
Oh my God. You have to sort of get this intestinal fortitude and weirdly be both completely open to trying to like learn from it and not let it get you down, like constantly, right? I mean, it's not like just in a generic sense, Jesse, like, oh, I don't believe in your vision. It's like, somebody gives you negative feedback on your product or negative Glassdoor review or whatever. And you got to both own that reality that they believe that's true. And there's something to learn from, but not like, let it make you not believe in everything you're doing, And so that's like this hard balance that every rejection, every no, every person that doesn't believe, it's not like a verdict on like you forever. It's just feedback, and I think that that's a hard thing to balance. And I still struggle with it. But it's like, how quickly can you bounce back from that negative feedback, but also not ignore it? That's the hard thing, So I'm still the super paranoid entrepreneur. I read, every online review of our product, every NPS feedback, every Glassdoor review, everything. I read everything, right? And so a lot of it's good and some of it's constructive. And when it's constructive, sometimes it brings me down and then I jump on it and I try to talk to the customer. And then eventually you like remember, you're like, oh yeah, wow, like that customer that gave us terrible feedback like 5 years ago is now like a huge fan of ours, right? Or that employee that wrote a negative Glassdoor review is a big fan, right? Yeah. You realize things can turn around, then it gives you a little confidence. You can do it.
Well, I think that gives you, that's the whole case for your product, right? Is that through good customer success, you turn haters into people that are most loyal if you do it right.
That's exactly right. And you know how it is. Like sometimes the people that had the toughest experience, but then you turn around and become your biggest fans, because we all know that like that's when a vendor can really show what you're made of. I was just talking to somebody today, one of our customers, where they like had to move to like a new version of our technology, and it was a rough because it was like the beta version. But they were like, the thing I loved was you guys were always there for us the whole time, So in the moment, there were some like heated emails that were exchanged, and then later on, he's like a bigger fan now. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Totally agree. I love it. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk more about the initial product that you end up building. So yep. I think, at least with my experience with founders, this is probably where the most follies take place. Yep. In terms of identifying what to build, how to build it, how much to spend on it, how long it should take, how to test it, everything about it. So just generally, if you were to give the 2-minute overview of how you went about building Gainsight's first product, what did that look like?
Yeah. So it's funny because we've, over the years, you kind of hopefully, if you're investing, you eventually like rewrite everything you do. That's, I think, software over time. It's like, you can hardly even connect like the old thing to the new thing. It's the core pieces are there, but you should be rewriting it, right? Because over 8 years, technology changes, needs change. What we started out, our space, really people thought that the answer was purely in data. I alluded to that before, Jesse, of like, people thought that, like in 2013, this is just an AI problem. It's a data problem. In fact, there are a few startups competing with us that probably focused even more on the AI and the data part of it. And they're good companies, actually really smart people, but just, probably got that wrong a little bit. And like what we quickly figured out was that if you're in customer success, you want to figure out the data, but actually that's not easily just an AI problem because there's so much nuance to a customer, right? Like there's so many things about who your champion is and what the situation is. You need to aggregate the data so it's easy to find in one place. But the bigger thing that we learned was early on, it's about action. It's not about data only. It's about data turning into action. It's about basically figuring out how to be proactive. And so the recommendations, the workflow, the automation, not just the AI and the data. That was a huge decision point. Some competitors of ours focus more on the data. We focus more on the action. And I think that had a couple effects. Number one is I think we solved more of the real pain and need in the market, and did it in a way that was solvable because some of the AI stuff just wasn't solvable at the time. Not because of technology, but just because of maturity. Number two, though, is when you become a workflow kind of automation system, you become more sticky, right? Because you're just the thing people use every day. So honestly, like, tens and tens of thousands of CSMs use Gainsight every day, like, just to do everything that they do or some part of what they do. And so that was kind of I think a big thing for us and probably relevant for some of the folks watching is like, how do you get into the daily workflow of your users?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So then by definition, what was the first product?
The first product was basically health scores for your customers. So it would take data about your customers, their product usage, support interactions, and turn it into these kind of red, yellow, green. How's that customer doing? And then help you prioritize which ones are at risk. And then the second phase of that was the actions and workflow to then do something about that.
Okay, gotcha. That's actually, especially in 2013, 2014, that was a fairly sophisticated product, right?
Yeah, it was actually, honestly, like Gainsight overall was definitely ahead of the market, and everyone, all of our competitors, we were all ahead of the market need. So that's why it was kind of hard in the early days, because frankly, people were just trying to figure out what a CSM is and things like that. So weren't even necessarily paying for software. But yeah, that was like that. Today, most companies are implementing some kind of like, okay, how do I tell my customer how my customers are doing using data? And most of them use Gainsight. But yeah, early on, that was definitely early for our time.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you came to the conclusion to take that specific angle and position it in that way. Were you working with potential customers? Was it just the three of you, like being smart?
No, we had a big community. I told you we did that big event. So we were really, really good at like staying in touch with the market. And there, like any new market, there are innovators and pioneers and thought leaders, although that term is so cheesy, that that we're all, kind of trying to define this market together. So like Gainsight wasn't created by us, it was created with our customers, right? And with the community. And so, yeah, somebody would say, we should have a scoring system for our customers. Another person should say, we should do workflow off that, right? And you'd get all those ideas and you'd hear some of that, as you know, Jesse, you'd hear the ideas like 5 times. You're like, God, we really should do that. We heard that from 5 different customers, right? And part of it was just going deep with some early customers. So like Box was one of our big customers, the collaboration file sharing company. And they were an incredible early SaaS innovator, great team, and they helped really shape a lot of what our early product looked like. And actually, a lot of it was funny. We wanted to get Box and as a customer, and literally for like a year and a half, I think we went to their office basically every week, and every other week. I knew the people at the front desk, and they knew me. They almost felt bad. I was coming back so many times. I knew Aaron, the CEO, and he'd be like, "Are you gonna work here eventually? Because you're just like spending so much time here, And we even a fun little anecdote, Jesse. We so badly wanted Box as a customer. We made a music video as like a plea to get them as a customer. And I will tell you, this is the cheesiest part of the story. But there's a song from the 90s. Some people may remember. You might be too young. Some people might be too young to remember. Called "What If God Was One of Us" by Joan.
Oh, of course, yeah.
What if God was one of us? And we made "What If Box Was One of Us?" And it's like a terribly shot video because we were a very little company, but actually they ended up buying the software. And the reason I tell you the whole story is like you end up hopefully going really deep with some customers and just like getting to know their needs really well. And every time you meet them, they're telling you, well, I'm thinking about this idea, or what about this? What about this? And eventually maybe you have enough that you can sell it to them, right? That was our story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So let's be tactical for a second and talk about how you actually got the thing built. So, how did you go about drawing a line and like, this is going to be our MVP and we need to implement it? Did you outsource it? Did you hire a dev team? Like, what did you do?
Luckily we had a great dev team. One of our founders, our CTO, Sridhar, had an amazing team. He'd built another company before. So we had an awesome team from internal. So that part wasn't a issue. We did sort of build a, I don't know if we ever called it an MVP or beta, but it basically was. It's funny because in hindsight, I'm like, I can't believe we sold anyone that, because it didn't really it didn't really work. But people were very kind. Customers early on are very kind. You have a lot of like damage control, but frankly, what ends up happening is the early customers, they want to be innovators. They want to try stuff that doesn't totally work, right? They want to give you feedback and they want to know that they're helping to make it happen. So one of my biggest things I tell entrepreneurs is like, it's not about finding the companies, it's finding the people that want to be those pioneers, those innovators that want to go on the journey with you. And all of those people at Gainsight, still to this day, they're some of our most important friends and colleagues in the company,
Yeah. So are you saying to bring them on board with your company or to be your champions?
To be our champions. Yeah. In some cases, obviously bring them on board. One thing we did do early on, to Jesse, to your point, is we hired one of our first customers. So Dan Simon was the head of customer success at Marketo, one of our first customers. We hired Dan to work at Gainsight to be our chief customer officer. And that had an incredible benefit because it helped us figure out the product. That was one part of it. But also he became an evangelist for the space. And he could go to customers and say, look, I've been in your shoes, and not talk about Gainsight technology, talk about hiring CSMs and compensation and all those kinds of things. Like he had been in their shoes. And then later on, he went on to write with me the book on customer success, which became kind of the authoritative book on the field. Yeah. So getting that evangelist who kind of has been in the shoes of your customers, if you can afford it, if you can find them, I think that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. By the way, that's a great way to solidify your place in creating a category is to write the book on it.
Yeah, the book is
very smart. Okay. Now this is a nuanced question, but was there some sensitivity there in taking your champion out of one of your first clients and hiring them inside Gainsight?
It's an awesome question. In this case, there wasn't, and it's a long story. He was moving on anyways. But in general, I think that's something to watch out for sure. But I think people are kind of overblow that too much. I think that's
fair enough.
At the end of the day, I think it's a free market, and you got to get the right people, the right places, and everyone's got to earn the right to keep their employees. But I think that is an issue you have to deal with sometimes early on. We actually, unrelated to that, we did get issues which some of you might face of, you hire a few people from the same company and then they send you a fun little letter from the legal department about, not hiring more people for that company, and don't stress out. Like I remember I got the first version of those and everyone sends them to everyone else and it's completely meaningless and nobody does anything about it as far as I know.
Well, and it's got to be way more intense in Silicon Valley than it is outside the Valley. People just stealing each other all the time.
I think so. And although now it's happening everywhere, and you're in a very hot part of the world now too. So yeah, it's happening more everywhere, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so something else that I feel like just attaches itself well to initial product is initial sales, and you've kind of hinted at how you went about doing that. That event sounds like an interesting kind of first step. It's so hard to get that first sale. So you alluded to Box. You said that there was Marketo. You did an event. Was there anything of one thing that led to another? Like, what was there a formula, or did it just kind of happen?
Yeah, the event was the biggest thing for us. That definitely just kind of let us lay claim to the space and to sort of become the thought leader in it. And that event just got bigger and bigger, 300 people, then 900, then 2,000, eventually last year was 23,000 people. So that event is sort of the thing that kind of catapulted us and I think gave us the right to write the book, which then, all that stuff gave us the right to sell some customers software. And, the event also gives you a platform where you can feature your customers, and customers, they want to be featured, right? They want to speak at events. So it's sort of a very much a virtuous cycle. So clearly Pulse, our event, was one of the things that the first domino that got everything else falling into place.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that, as founders look at this, being in the early trenches, I think is maybe something to just talk about for a minute, right? You came out of the gates well-funded, you had a great team, you had connections to have good developers to build product. Obviously, you're extraordinarily charismatic in the ability to sell and persuade people to create a category. But there's clearly stress along the way. So at any point, did you think, I don't know if this is actually going to work?
All the time. Yeah. Jesse, we just did our big, sort of investment with Vista, and it was a big, huge day for the company, and everyone was so proud. And I shared a photo of our first office in Mountain View. And I remember when we signed the lease, it's let's say an 18-month or 2-year lease. And it was 3,000 square feet. And it was, I don't know, maybe $10,000 a month or $15,000 a month. And I just was like, I don't think we're going to make it to the end of this lease. I don't know if we're going to actually be in business, Like, I didn't know if the company is, like, is this really a space? Like, am I really going to be able to do this? Like, people tell us it's not a space. So yeah, there's probably some entrepreneurs who have no doubts, and more power to them. I believe there's a lot of entrepreneurs who have to be confident because you got to get people excited. And in reality, they, like, every day they have doubts. I mean, the image I always had in my head is like you're sailing on the ocean, and you're looking out at the horizon, and you're like kind of the explorers back from the New World era, right? And you're looking at the horizon, and you're like, okay, well, either the world is curved and there's like a new world on the other side, or that's just a cliff and I'm going off the cliff at the end. You really don't know, like, what's it going to be like at the end, And so yeah, no, I completely worried about failing the entire time, 100%.
So those are big emotions, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
putting your time, your reputation, often your own money on the line.
Right.
So how did you manage those emotions? Because I mean, that's a different kind of emotion than being told it's not going to work.
Right.
But the feeling of,
Yeah,
like, what did you do about it?
And the bigger you get, the more people you'd be failing, the more employees, the more investment, the more money, the more customers, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't think any magic, but the one thing I would say that there's actually two things that I found that very therapeutic. One is finding whatever things that you do that help you reconnect to, like, why you do and why you believe in what you do. So for me, it's like meeting these customer success people. The other day, like, this happened a lot of times now. I was on a little, like, weekend getaway in the Bay Area, just in a little beach hotel, and like somebody came up to me and said, "You're Nick Mehta, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You were Gainsight." I'm like, "Yeah." He said, you made my job of customer success a career. I want to thank you." And so those moments where you can interact with people and feel like, remember why you do it. It could be with your employees, could be with your customers, whatever, right? To me, that like gives you the energy. And so remember those and then try to go back to them if you're feeling doubt. The second thing is, I think, remembering the premise about what you believed that caused you to do this company. Like in our case, what do we believe? Well, we believe that in the future, there'll be more businesses where customers have more power, where basically vendors have to make sure customers are using the product. And in that future, we're going to need to make sure that, customers are using it, driving value, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I'd go back and I'd say, do I still believe that? And then I'd tell myself, yeah, I still believe that. That's 100% true. Are there going to be less customers that have power? No way. And then I'd say, well, okay, if I believe that future is inevitable, then why would we not be the winner in that future? Why would somebody else win? Like, why not us? What about us would not cause us to win? And then I kind of psyched me up to go at it again. Yeah. So yeah, kind of a daily thing.
Yeah. And so that's a daily thing, like, to go through and like,
it's not like I habitually do it every day, but I think practically, like, every couple of days. Yeah.
Got it. That's really good advice. Well, I just like to hand the last 5 minutes to just hand you the mic. Imagine you're in front of an audience of 1,500 people, and half the audience are currently in the trenches. They're suffering through these early moments. Maybe they haven't raised outside funding, trying to get through that. And the other half are fence sitters that want to be entrepreneurs, maybe have something in their head, thinking about it. What would you tell those two groups about finding success?
Yeah, I mean, so there's no simple pithy statement. It's such a hard journey, and there's so much and all that. I think the only thing I'd tell you is I do what I hope for you, whatever you do, is that you can find every day what that why is behind what you do and why you do it. So for me, I've kind of really distilled it down in my own head, and I sort of like, this is kind of what I go back to. There's three things, and I feel very lucky that I've got these three things. Number one is I love the craft of what I do every day. And I hope, like, if you become an entrepreneur, I hope you like the craft. When I say the craft, think of like somebody that's a woodworker and they love, like, sanding the wood, or somebody that's a painter and they like making those strokes of paint, right? Like, I hope you like whatever it is you do every day. I love talking to people. I love, God forbid, I love Zoom meetings. I would miss I'd miss all this if I was retired. I don't think I'm ever going to retire. So I hope you love the craft. I hope the number two thing is I hope you can find some kind of purpose in your work. And I don't mean like your company is changing the world or whatever, because I think a lot of that's overstated. Gainsight's not changing the world. But, we do have some small purpose. Like I mentioned, we're helping this career. It's really cool when it can help people in that career. We have this approach to business we call a human first business. So I really believe in what we do, even if it's not like the end all be all of the whole world. We're not SpaceX, we're not Tesla. I still believe in what we do. And then number three is I hope you find whatever drives you. Like for me, I am very self-aware that I also want to win, and I want to want to like prove my parents, make them happy that I've done something right. All of us have that in our minds, right? Somebody you're trying to prove, live up to, or prove wrong or prove right. And I think that's okay too. And so I have those three motivations every day: my loving the craft, believing in a small way in what I do, and then wanting to win. And I hope you find that. That doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur. I mean, honestly, whatever job, I hope you have that. Entrepreneurship definitely just requires a lot of that, because you got to just keep going. So you got to really have a lot of that, because otherwise, it's definitely too hard, and people will usually throw in the towel. So if you jump over the fence, I hope you have the right support in your life and the right belief in your heart to go after it.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Nick, thanks for spending so much time with us. It's awesome to hear your origin story, and congratulations again on all of Gainsight's success. It's entrepreneurs like you that really paved the path for the rest of us to follow.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for featuring folks, and good luck to everyone in their journey.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.